How you doing?
Hey, Peter, what's going on?
Good. How you
Good to see
doing?
you. You know, hanging in there. Oh, did I tell you about the septic at all?
Thank you, everyone. This evening is January 23rd. This is a regular meeting of the RTM Joint Committees. Will you all please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance?
To the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Our first item this evening will be appointments. To consider and act upon the following appointment to the Employee Retirement Board as recommended by the First Selectman, Carolyn Trabuco, Democrat, 221 Sherwood Farm Road. Mrs. Trabuco, would you please take a seat in front? Good evening. Could you please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about why you want to take on this position?
Thank you. My name is Carolyn Trabuco.
It's on.
That work? My name is Carolyn Trabuco. I live on Sherwood Farm Road. I've been in Fairfield for 18 years. The reason why I'm interested in this position is not just because Brian Vahey approached me about this some time ago, but I've spent the last 25 years, pretty much my entire professional career has been spent in the investment business. I have been on multiple sides of the street, sell side, buy side, hedge funds, commodities. In addition, I've served on a corporate board of directors where I'm chair of a compensation committee and have had to devise and run a long-term compensation plan, including retirement plans for a company that has 10,000 employees. For people who know me know that I like digging into the details. I am pretty independent-minded. I speak the language, if you will, of the financial community. And I have been looking for some time to find some way to contribute in a more formal manner to the town that fits my schedule in that I work full-time. Specifically to the language of this industry, I really like going through the past minutes in the financial report because it mentions things like investment teams, research capabilities, global experience, context for investing, risk management processes, diversification, ESG, and fee structures. And those are all of the things that I have worked with in the 25 years that I have been working in this and related industries.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions for Mrs. Trabuco? Representative Hurley.
Hi, Michael Hurley, RTM District 10. Nice to see you again, Ms. Trabuco. I think the last time we spoke, you were considering running for the BOE, and I've gone through your resume, and you really do have very, very strong professional and educational experiences, and I think would be very valuable to the board. And I am inclined to vote for you. But I do have a few questions for you. I mean, no doubt you're a strong proponent of education, and there's no doubt that the Employees Retirement Board is a serious board. Personally, I think Chairman Vahey has done an outstanding job. It's very important to the town's finances that the portfolios be managed prudently. So I guess my first question for you is, I mean, given your strong views on education, and you have a very, very strong financial acumen as well, and as I said, educational, if you needed to take actions on the board that could, potentially lead us down a pathway, and by actions I'm talking about, needing to raise, or actually, lower the expected rate of return on the portfolio, which could conceivably mean that there's less money to be spent on education. Do you think you would be able to do that and be able to separate your, very, very strong support for education in terms of looking at the portfolio?
How to answer that? Maybe we could talk first on it's a great question, on the expected rate of return, the discount rate.
Yeah.
that we'd be looking at. Presently, the discount rate, I think, for the pension fund is somewhere over 7%. With today's interest rate environment, even with the slight steepening of the yield curve, it's hard to imagine that that's a number that's achievable. And I understand that's probably the next topic of consideration for the pension board. Notwithstanding my great support for education in this town, and any town, and if you look through my resume, you'll see that I've been engaged with education and education issues for a long time. I think getting the numbers right matters. The issue that has attracted me with education and any other endeavor that I've pursued is trying to get to the correct number, knowing that there will always be pushes and pulls along the way. I think the foundational support that a pension fund gives to its employees, and bear in mind the pension fund covers about 1,500 employees, none of whom are on the education side, right? These are town, about 2/3 of the pension fund employees are active employees, about 1/3 are retirees. Clearly, if I were to serve on this board, my responsibilities to the pension board would, of course, come first. And I don't see them as being in inherent conflict. My views to support education and resource that correctly, I don't view as in conflict with coming on to the pension board.
Okay, well, thank you for that. And the last time we spoke, I think you had indicated to me that you were the co-facilitator or co-Facebook poster, or
I'm a
allow people
blogger.
to go on
Right.
out onto the education support group known as Faces.
Mm-hmm.
Given what we just talked about and the roles and responsibilities, do you think that's at all, in your opinion, a conflict going forward if you were to be on the pensions boards and be on a sort of a special interest type of Facebook blog?
I don't see that platform in the way that you describe it. To me, it is a location, it's a place for people to express their opinions. I believe it's an open site. I choose to put my opinions on it to the extent that I have them, or I've done analysis on certain parts of the ed budget, and I find that deeply satisfying to do that and to put the time and effort into it. I don't see them as at odds with one another. I don't believe that there's a group. Perhaps I'd like to understand where you're headed in that.
No, it's just a general question to get your perspective. I mean, again, going on the pension board is a serious area, and I think people that go on it need to be very, open-minded and independent. As I said, I was, predisposed to vote in favor of you for this appointment. But again, it's a serious board, and you're someone who is, very, very, involved and quite vocal in town. So I think it's, fair questions. One more question, then, just to sort of round out. Can I just ask my question
but
first?
I'd like to
because then it
follow
may
up to
sort
that.
of may
Okay.
sort of answer it. So on the Faces Facebook page, can anyone who's on Facebook simply go and post to it?
Yeah.
Or do you have to first approve that person to be part of the group?
I didn't set it up. So my understanding is anyone can go on, and if you know anyone else who's on that site, they have the ability to accept you in. And my understanding, at least my observation, has been that is set to keep, non, we'll call them
Spammers or?
spamware, we'll call them whatever. I don't think that they are set up to prevent anyone
Okay.
from coming onto it.
All right.
That's
Well-
never been my impression of the site.
Okay. So I'm satisfied with your responses, and I will support you. Thank you.
Anybody else? Representative Wackerman.
Karen Wackerman, District 7. Carolyn, I would say my observations from first of all, I guess I don't really see a connection between you periodically posting on Faces and what you'll be doing on the pension board. But I did want to just say that my observation is two things about your posts. One is that you provide invaluable financial analysis for all of us who read it. And the other is that I don't see you as one-sided. My impression is that you have opinions that vary, and you don't have just a one pro-education, pro-budget all the time, no matter what. You have a very reasoned analysis that's helpful, I think, to everybody who reads it. So I thank you for that, and I think you'd be terrific on the pension board.
Representative Pine.
Good evening. One of the dark moments in Fairfield's history was investing with Bernie Madoff, and we lost, either recovered most of the money, but we lost a lot of it, investment opportunity. What safeguards would you have in place that we do not have a repeat of the Bernie Madoff type of situation since you're...
Great question. Firstly, fraud can be very difficult to spot. So let's understand that fraud can be very hard to find ahead of time. There are ways to, I think, to mitigate the risk of being the party to a fraudulent act, the likes of a Madoff. They would include diversification. They would include risk controls that would force a revisiting of a position if a position becomes in excess of a certain percentage of the overall fund. They would include diligence, quarterly reviews, annual reviews. It's a lot of diversification and rigor and diligence, and at the end of the day, I think it's stop-loss measures and risk measures that would help. But frauds, I've uncovered professionally as an analyst, I've uncovered 2 frauds, both of which resulted in the CEOs going to jail. And I've done that through my financial analysis. And on that end, you can do that by looking at the growth of receivables versus sales and tracking that over periods of time and trying to understand how the balance sheet is being used. Now that's specific to an equity. What I think Bernie Madoff did is in a category all his own. And while I would really like to think that it can't ever happen again, I would never be so bold as to say something like that. I think it's diligence and hard work and diversification that helps bolster against that.
Anybody else? Representative McCarthy.
Hi, Carolyn.
Hey.
Great portfolio. I'm sorry, great credentials, I was going to say. Just on the basis of the comment you made before about the implicit discount rate, which I happen to agree with you, what would you do differently in terms of the portfolio itself? Would you try to grow the portfolio or do nothing? You feel the risk is where it ought to be at this point in time?
Well, I think it's really premature to ask me that question now. I'm not on the inside of seeing position reports.
Well, that's why I just throw it out there. And if the question's inappropriate because you can't, that's fine too.
So, perhaps I can help you understand how I would approach answering that without being able to give a specific question. The markets have been great, right? The equity markets have the S&P 500 has had a terrific run over the past few years. It's been probably the most hated bull market that we've seen on equities. Bonds were terrific last year. It's very difficult to predict the impact of future rate rises and Fed activity to the portfolio, or a strong dollar against a weak dollar proponent, coming into the administration. I would not look, personally, I would not be an advocate of, flooring it and saying, let's go for the risk. I think that a pension fund is a delicate matter. And I would defer to the views of the board as a whole, and the consultants who are used and the advisors who are involved. Funny about the discount rate with interest rates. So I'm in the process, my husband and I are in the process of redoing our life insurance. And the illustrations they gave us are for 6.25%. And I asked the question in the diligence meeting with the insurance people, and they brought the regional guy in to meet with me. They figured that I was going to ask you some questions. And over the past 4 years, they haven't delivered a return north of 4.25%. So I asked the question, why do you show an illustration of 6.25, and yet you only return 4.25? And their answer was, well, 6.25 is what the regulators will cap us out at showing. So just you didn't understand that he's just underperforming relative to what they were selling. And I think the question to ask and the approach is, are we getting kind of what we think we're getting? And where should we be? Where should we be allocating those resources? Commodities are interesting, right? The town, the investment proposal actually that's about 10 years old on the website forbids commodities. That was revised. We went through a great commodity roundup. There might be a place for commodities. That might give you that pro-cyclical growth exposure, but not at the expense of putting too much of that pension fund at risk.
Okay, so you would describe yourself as more risk averse.
You know, I am balanced. I have always been a GARP girl. I'm a growth at a reasonable price person is how I've described kind of my investment style. I love growth, love growth, love to see growth. I think our pension fund would love some growth, but you know, not if it's at an unreasonable price.
And risk averse is not a bad thing, especially for a pension fund, so
Agreed.
that's a good answer.
Agreed.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Yeah.
Representative Gale.
Thank you. I'm new to the RTM. This is my first administration. And when I came on board, we had a meeting and I was informed of what had happened with the Bernie Madoff situation. And then I was indulged by Mike Tetro, and he actually gave me the name of, you know, the pension management fund, and I actually looked everything up on the town's website, including minutes, because my sister happens to own an actuary firm in San Francisco, and so I had her double check and look into the company, and it is Coughlin and Associates, I believe, and according to my sister, there can be no more reputable company, and so I think a lot was remedied after the situation that occurred, and things have been really set aright. Are you aware of this company? Do you know anything of their reputation?
I don't. I don't know Coughlin. I can tell you that those years, the Madoff years for Pequot, for Fairfield, the pension fund, over-earned, had great performance, and I am proud to have been on the Pequot team, right? And Pequot was an investment the town had that did quite well, and I was an analyst on that team at the time. So, you know, Madoff had to be written off, but Pequot grew.
Anybody else? Seeing none, thank you very much for being here this evening. Next item is to hear an appointment to the Historic District. Christopher Shea, Republican, 917 Merwins Lane, term 2016 to 2021. You may all recognize Mr. Shea. Is currently an alternate on the Historic District Commission, and it's being recommended that he move up to a full member. Welcome, sir.
Thank you.
Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Shea? Since he's been before us before, I'm not going to make him go through the whole rigmarole of his history. Seeing none, thank you very much for being here, and good luck with the Historic District Commission.
Thank you very much.
Next item is on the report is the lease report. However, I got last-minute notice from the First Selectman's office that Attorney Lesser isn't able to be here this evening. So I'm going to ask that you all please make sure you do read the lease report. If you have any questions, would you please forward them to me via email by the end of the week so that I can get them to Attorney Lesser, and that way he can address them on the floor of the RTM on Monday. But I want to be able to move the process along so that if you do have questions, please send them to me in writing, and I will get them to Attorney Lesser, Representative Hurley.
Will Attorney Lesser also be giving the standard presentation that he would have given tonight at the regular monthly meeting on the leases?
If that's what you're requesting, yes.
I'd like to make a request that Stanton Lesser make the...
That's fine. Just send me an email.
I will. Thank you.
Anybody else? All right, next up, the Blight Officer Report. Mr. Conley.
Pointed at my face.
Welcome, Mr. Conley. Can you just give us the highlights of your blight report and then take any questions that our representatives might have?
Sure. This year, 2016, there were 17 blight complaints. There was a total of 49 complaints that were processed through the 2016 year. 39 of the complaints have been closed out and 10 remain on our condemnation blight agenda. I did write a little a synopsis of the remaining blighted properties and the properties that had been resolved. So it is an active board. We do a lot of small to large blight prevention. So.
Great. Thank you. Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Conley? Representative Ambrose.
Good evening, Tom.
Good evening,
I'd like
Peter.
to ask you, what have you received, or what has been collected by way of fines this year?
Yeah, Peter, I have not tracked that. I wish I had known earlier. I would have taken an accounting of that for you. Most of the money goes through the finance department. Caitlin Bosey collects it, puts it in. It is in my my budget, but I did not track it this year. We don't really have any. We don't use it. We don't. Just gets tracked through our department.
Those funds go into the general fund?
Yes, they do.
Can you, next week, bring some kind of report indicating what's been collected?
Absolutely, yes, sir.
And further, is it your understanding that, is there a statute that essentially states, to the best of your knowledge, where the funds should go when they're collected pursuant to a blight ordinance?
There's a new state statute, Peter, that I've run through the Stanton Lesser, our town attorney, and he has a different take on that, and it's something that I'd like to discuss either with yourself, the Blight Committee Chairman, and Stanton Lesser as well, so we can really define it. Other towns use it in a different format. They use it to collect the money and use the money within their budgetary within that board. They use the money. I kind of agree with what Stanton sees in it, but I would like for other people to take a look at it and see how we can implement it for the town, maybe collect some more funds for that organization.
Other towns, I think recently I read an article relative to the town of Stratford, and I understand that some towns do use that money to rehabilitate or to ameliorate blight issues with in-town properties. Would they have the domain to do that?
Correct, yes.
Would that be beneficial if our town, I mean, is there someone that has the time to do that? Is there someone on your committee that would have the time to oversee that?
Well, it's a committee. If it were given to us, we would find the time. I mean, I'm also the chief building official, so there's a lot to do there. So we take time out from our regularly scheduled jobs to do this, and we incorporate it into our job. So if you said to me you want it done, absolutely, we'll get it done.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else have any questions? Representative Gerber.
Yeah, hi, Tom. Bill Gerber, District 2. Just for informational purposes, have there been any changes to the procedures at all over the past maybe a year or two? I can't recall whether I remember there were some amendments that we looked at a couple years ago, but in terms of the procedures for filing complaints, how you need to file, what information you need to provide, anything different?
Not really. No substantive changes. We would like to see some of those, something occur with that, and we've spoken with Mr. Lesser about that. We've given him a format to simplify the whole ordinance and make it easier for us and more timely for us to get these things done. Some of these properties carry on and on and on, and it's a burden, to be honest with you.
Right. Thank you.
As a follow-up to that, will you be seeking out sponsors from the RTM to make possible revisions to the ordinance?
Once we get back our Stanton Lesser's take on the information we passed on to him and see how to format those into the blight ordinance, we would like to present it to the RTM and see about whether they're substantive or not, how to change those. We passed it along to Stanton. Hopefully he'll get back to us fairly soon and we can make some small changes that'll help us out a lot.
Okay, great, thank you. Anybody else? Seeing none. Representative Ambrose, are you okay with Mr. Conley sending a report to us that we could post online, or would you prefer he return on Monday with that information?
I'd like him to return. I'd like you to be there on Monday if you don't mind, Tom.
Thank you so much, Peter.
I tried.
Are the cameras off, can I say?
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll see you on Monday.
Thank you very much.
The next item is the photovoltaic lease at the Conservation Garage. Mr. Michelangelo. Joe, before we get started on this one, I got an email late in the day from Kathleen Griffin. I guess did you get a notification that there's a change in what we're reviewing? Can you just run us through whatever that is?
Is this on? Okay,
Yes.
that sounds like it's on. Okay, and just the differentiation, when the town enters into the agreements with solar providers, there's two pieces of the puzzle. There's a power purchase agreement, which is agreement for us to buy power at a set rate between the provider for the next 20 years. And there's also a lease that allows the vendor to access the property and work on it. So from what I understand, the power purchase agreement, which was approved by the Board of Selectmen, does not need to come before this body, but the leasing of town property does have to come before this body.
Okay, so to simplify it, the first portion of the resolution revolving around the solar power purchase agreement has already been adopted by the Board of Selectmen. What
Correct.
we're dealing with is the site lease agreement.
Correct.
Okay, great. Does everybody understand that? And we'll have that modified for Monday. Thank you.
Okay, I'll give a quick overview of how these solar projects works, and the one at the Conservation Garage is basically the mirror image of the one at the Public Works Garage. But the one at the Conservation Garage, the way the town has gone about probably about a dozen of these projects is we work with a solar provider, and they provide they pay for the capital to install these solar arrays on our buildings, and so the town doesn't put up any money up front. But the thing that we do get power purchase at a below market rate, and in this case for the Conservation Garage it's at 8.1 cents. So for the next 20 years that's what we'll be purchasing power on. And the way these companies are able to invest the capital to do these deals, well, they'll have a stream of money from the town for the next 20 years selling electricity. They'll also receive a ZREC, which is Zero Energy Renewable Credit, which they in turn sell to the UI because UI has to provide this type of power. And they get a tax investment credit. So it's a public-private partnership that lets the town obtain power at a discounted rate without any capital. So that's how the power purchase agreement portion of it works. The financing arm of the last several projects has been Connecticut Green Bank, which also goes by the name of CFIA. And one of the things they require, if they have a system that's going to be on a town building, they require, just from a legal point of view, that they have a lease that they're able to access the property. So that's what this lease is for on basically the Conservation Garage roof. Every one of these that Connecticut Green Bank has been involved in, and they've probably been involved in the last 4 or 5 as the financing arm. This lease was required, and it's come before this board previously.
Great, thank you. Does anybody have any questions? Seeing none. Oh, I'm sorry, Representative Gerber.
Just for informational purposes, Joe, how are you? Bill Gerber, District 2. How are the rates set? I probably would, if I'd read the whole thing carefully, I might have seen it, but the Schedule Ds between the two contracts, one's 7.3 cents and the other's 8.1. rates, and how does that work?
Let's see, and they have to capture all their costs to make the project work. So on some project, there's more investments than others. So the cheapest insulation is if you do it on a flat roof. If there are a structure involved, such as the parking garage, the parking lot at the park rec garage, which is a similar type facility, that's more investment of capital. You have to put stanchions, you have to put infrastructure there. So in that, the overall capital cost would be higher, so they wouldn't be able to sell their power at that discounted rate. So the more you have to invest in these projects, the more roof repair is, the more difficult the project it is, it eats into your savings. The simplest, cheapest project, if you could go on a roof and just put it there, attach it to the roof with little or no other costs, that brings the price of the project down and you get electricity for the cheapest. So there is some variation in the price based on the cost of capital.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Representative Garskoff, then Representative McCarthy.
Thank you. Is this on? You getting this? Joe, forgive me if I missed it. Can you ballpark the savings to the town from this plan?
It's so on the conservation garage, if you figure that we're purchasing power at a 50% of market rate, the approximate cost of electricity at the conservation garage is about $4,000. So we'd be paying $2,000 a year. So every year for the next 20 years, and the savings increase. But on year one, we'd be saving $2,000 worth of electricity at no out-of-pocket cost to the town.
Thank you.
Representative McCarthy.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Joe, in my package, I see the lease agreement for the garage at One Rod Highway. I don't see the second lease agreement for Public Works garage. Is that, it's just an omission? I assume both, I assume the boilerplates in each case are exactly the same, the terms are the same.
I think they're in the packet, and the first one, let's see, the first one,
Yeah, I know.
the first
I
one
don't
is
see
the which is labeled 51 Rod Highway,
Yep,
that's the conservation garage.
this one I see.
The Public Works garage is near the back, and it's listed as 357 Vera Street, because that's the address of the electrical service. So if you could picture the Public Works garage, it's the original wing of the building, which is furthest to the east. So it backs up right to the cul-de-sac of Veris where the park is there, which is why it has a 357 Veris address. If you...
Oh, yeah, there's
Okay,
two.
I mean, I looked at it earlier, I just can't find it.
They're two separate stapled documents.
Yeah, all right.
I think it's about 16 pages from the back.
It's all of that. Yeah, okay.
They look almost exactly the same.
Well, I'm sure they do. Okay. As long as there's a separate agreement and the boilerplate's the same, I'm okay. Thank you.
Yeah, the first one listed is the Richard White Way, and then the second one listed is Vera Street. And they're literally identical except for until you get towards the end.
I think Wayne has a comment.
Representative Way.
Madam Moderator, am I allowed to ask a question that does not apply to this, but that I know Joe will have the answer for?
Technically speaking, no.
Pardon?
Technically speaking, no, but will it be quick?
I'll be very quick.
All right.
It came out of the blight thing, basically, that made me think of it. I noticed that some of our grants may change in connection with improvement projects and things of that sort, and it made me think of Kings Highway again and the improvement project. I think that we have a reduction in the grant coming from the state in connection with that. Is that correct?
Offhand, I'm not sure, but I know that...
I think it was about a $350,000 reduction or something along that line.
I know there's something on the Board of Selectmen meeting Wednesday, and Bill Hurley could give you a call just to give you some notice on what that is. Yeah, it's, I wouldn't say it's reworking the financing, but it's clarifying all those finance questions, because we have probably around 3 different grants, and one of them is 100%, one of them is 20/80, and one of them's paying for design, one of them's paying for construction, we pay for design. So one of the purposes of the matter at the Board of Selectmen meeting is just to delineate where the project stands as far as a financial standpoint.
Okay, but this was directly from the state, reducing the amount that they had agreed to in the past.
Okay. And I can have Bill Hurley give you a call directly just to walk
Thank
you
you.
through that.
Thank you. Thanks for indulging us. Anybody else?
Real quick.
Representative Gerber.
Sorry, Joe, just real quick on the savings. Just for fun, I looked up, what the current kilowatt hour cost is online before it came in Connecticut, and I think for homes it's probably different than commercial rate. But you could probably do a 1-year contract for like 8 cents per kilowatt hour. But are the savings here really more because they're held steady, so it's more like a net present value?
No, when we buy, and I don't believe that your number is correct. When you and I buy electricity from UI, we pay much higher rates because there's a generation portion of it and a distribution portion of it.
Okay.
So and once again, we're getting this one of the things about this is you don't pay any distribution, you're just paying for the generation rate.
Okay.
But I think if you and I look
You add it up, it's probably 16 cents per kilowatt hour?
even more.
Okay.
We could, I could pull a town bill, we could pull our own bills, and it's closer to 17, 18 by the time you get through all the charges.
Okay. And then is there an expectation that'll go up, or in your calculations you expect it? You don't know, so you don't factor that in?
It's not factored in here, but
Right.
yeah, we do assume there's a couple % increase on our cents. They may level off for a while, but in the long term, I think we could assume that they'll climb.
Okay, you answered my question. There's no, I was looking at the wrong thing, so thank you.
Anybody else? Seeing none, thank you very much. And
Thank you.
if this mirrors the second contract, does nobody has any questions on that, do they? Representative Garscon.
Just the same question, please, of what the total savings would be.
The Public Works garage is larger, so the savings per year will be about $4,500 per year on that project, and that's for a portion of the Public Works garage. We did a similar project about a year ago for another meter on the Public Works garage. So this addresses probably about 40% of the building.
Thank you.
Anybody else on the second contract? Seeing none, thank you very much for being here this evening. We
Thank you.
appreciate it. Next up is to hear a resolution on an equipment sharing agreement, and Chief Denis McCarthy is here to present that. Welcome, Chief.
Good evening, Denis McCarthy, Fire Chief.
If you could just walk us through the multi-town agency equipment agreement and this is related to a grant, I guess?
Yes, so the fire department intended and has in the fiscal year 17 budget funds to buy ballistic protection for firefighters who would operate in the hot zone, along with the police department and EMS. These would be active shooter type events. And we were approached by the city of Stamford, who had applied for a grant with the town of Norwalk and another Region 1 town, Fairfield County town, to purchase similar equipment. The third town backed out of the grant application, and Fairfield was given the opportunity to participate. So we will buy the equipment there's $32,000 of equipment, roughly $25,000 will be paid for by the grant, and the town of Fairfield will be obligated to spend its share, $6,400. That will come out of the existing budget that we had proposed to use for similar equipment in this fiscal year.
Fantastic. Anybody have any questions for the chief? Oh, Representative Perugini.
Yeah, Chief McCarthy, Bill Perugini, District 9, Chairman of Public Health and Safety. In your career, how many times have you had occasion to wear that sort of protective equipment?
Fortunately, never.
And hopefully you never will.
Yes, and I will use Chief McNamara's description of the value of this equipment. If you don't have it when you respond, you don't have it, and there is no opportunity to go back and get it. We will provide equipment for all the riding positions on all of our apparatus so that should we ever be called to respond to that type of event, whether in Fairfield or by virtue of our mutual aid obligations, we could respond anywhere in the region from Stratford to Greenwich. We would have that equipment available on moment's notice.
Thank you. Is it customary for most municipalities to share that equipment with several other cities, adjacent cities, as we're doing here?
So the grant application and what we're doing more and more is filing for regional grants. There's a greater chance of success when we operate regionally. The federal government is awarding grants primarily to regions or counties, and our region under the Department of Homeland Security is Stratford to Greenwich, and it resembles a county-type structure as it relates to this type of a grant, and we're far more successful. We are currently pursuing a grant for what is described as coordinated complex terrorist attack grant. There's $35 million being offered by the federal government in grants, about $1 million to $2.5 million. We're applying for a similar grant as a region because it's the only way that we'll be successful in participating in the grant program.
Thank you, and thanks for your service to our town.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Representative Ambrose.
Chief McCarthy, I'm reading on Schedule A the list of description of the equipment available. Would that all be maintained at Station 1?
So that will be distributed and divided by all of the engine companies that we have geographically located around town.
And not at one centralized location?
No. No, the idea is, as I described Chief McNamara's perspective and how he deploys that equipment, it's in the trunk of a police car or in a compartment on a fire truck so that it's available to the units responding when they arrive on scene.
And if we receive this equipment and you were to receive a call from, let's say, Trumbull, would you feel obliged to send our officers to Trumbull to respond to a serious attack?
So we operate this way for, and typically on a regular basis, to fires and accidents on the highway. This is almost a weekly occurrence that we perform some sort of mutual aid with our neighboring communities. On a frequent basis, but not weekly, we respond collectively and regionally through the mutual aid plan for hazmat. This would follow that same kind of format, but even less frequent than a hazmat call. But if we are trained and equipped, that we do, under the mutual aid agreement, respond to requests from any community who requests it.
Thank you.
Representative Garskoff.
Thank you. Chief, so it's an equipment sharing agreement, but we would have equipment in our town that would be at our disposal at any time. Can you help me with that?
So under the grant, it's intended to share the equipment between the three communities. We are not taking the equipment off of our fire apparatus and sending somewhere else to share it. We're sharing the capability that we have with the equipment to provide that level of service to anyone who might call. Typically, our mutual aid partners are all the 14 communities in Region 1. It's structured under the grant as a sharing agreement, but for practical purposes, we're sending a firefighter in that gear to provide that level of service.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Representative Pine.
Ron Pine, District 3. I've got a question. You mentioned active shooter. So my understanding, if there's an active shooter, say in a school, the police will respond, and they're active shooter scenarios. They go into the building and take out the shooter, and of course they need ballistic vests. My question to you is, why did a fire department need that?
So a couple of reasons. When we respond, and as you point out, the police department is entering the building, and every police officer who arrives is that's their primary mission. But simultaneously, a command structure needs to be stood up. That command structure would typically be in the warm zone, so not completely without risk. And the fire department and Chief McNamara and I and fire and law enforcement throughout the region have been having this discussion about what is the appropriate role of the fire department in the first moments of these types of events. If you think back to the October 17, 2015 swatting event where we had lockdown at all of our public schools, we provided that same level of service with the police department. There was a fire officer and a police officer in front of each of those schools taking command. It's not completely without risk, and they would be protected with ballistic protection as the person next to them wearing a different patch on his sleeve from the police department. But more importantly, once the police department and the protocol is to go in and continue to proceed through the building until they can neutralize the threat, and leaving victims behind who are or may have been injured, may have been seriously injured. The protocol is for fire and EMS to make entry behind the police department, now in a much riskier environment. It has been swept by the police department, but has not been secured. So we would be physically entering the building where there is an active shooter into areas that have been swept by the police department to render first aid. And the whole purpose of this equipment is to allow us to protect the firefighters and EMTs that are going in to render first aid behind the entry of the police department.
Okay. So, thank you.
Anyone else? Representative Perugini.
Yeah, just one further question for my own edification. So what's the relevance of Norwalk Hospital's involvement with this collaboration?
So Norwalk Hospital, because of, as I just described, this relationship between police, fire, and EMS, Norwalk Hospital was the party in the city of Norwalk that stepped in and said, yes, we will partner with the fire department to make sure that we have trained teams to make entry to provide that emergency first aid in the circumstances that I've described. So they are actually taking possession of the equipment, but again, through the sharing agreement, they will make entry with teams that are made up of both EMS and fire department.
Right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much.
The last item on the agenda is to hear a noise ordinance, and that's just being heard by LNA. So at this time, we can break into individual committees. Thank you, everyone. I'll see you all on Monday. If you could pass your plate cards down, that'd be much appreciated.
I can just make a quick announcement. We're expecting some flooding down at the beach tonight at high tide and tomorrow at 8 o'clock. So anybody who lives down that way certainly should be mindful. There might be some water in the street and it could affect their cars.
Flooding at the beach at high tide and when again in the morning, Chief? 8 o'clock tomorrow morning.
And
Thank you.
what block do you think it's going to start at, like 1200? Thank you. See you later.
Thank you very much.